Today, July 1st, is the feast of Junípero, Serra. He was a Franciscan. He came from the island of Majorca, which was part of Spain, and came and founded many of the missions in California. Last year, his legacy became controversial, and in many ways, he was canceled by contemporary culture. Statues of him were defaced and even torn down, especially in California. It brings to mind the complex narrative of the evangelization of the Americas. And I go back to comments that St. John Paul II made in Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic, during his visit to the Latin American Bishops' Conference meeting, which was held there in 1994. And he spoke of the importance and the goodness of the gospel being brought to the New World, and the proclamation of the good news of Jesus Christ to the natives, the significance of baptism, the celebration of the Eucharist. It was in the Dominican Republic that the first baptism in the New World was held, and I was a missionary there when we celebrated the 500th anniversary of that first baptism. But in that advent of the gospel, in that evangelization effort of the New World, there's certainly a mixture of light and shadows. So we can't ignore or erase the shadows of colonialism, the oppression, and even the murder of the native peoples. And the record of the church is mixed. There were many noble missionaries who defended the rights of the native peoples against the conquistadores, against the colonial powers. There were others, perhaps, that cooperated with the oppression of the natives. So again, light and shadows. It leads us to refrain from ever making universal sweeping statements that everything was all good or everything was all bad. As we know, in the complexity of our own lives, there's often a mixture. But at the end of the day, what St. John Paul II said was, it was an objectively good thing that the gospel was brought. That every time the gospel impacts a new culture, there's this cross-pollination. And the hope of the church is that the gospel will only purify those elements of a culture that are inimical to the truth of Jesus Christ and to the dignity of the human person. And that's the beauty of the faith, that it is truly an enculturated Catholicism. Think of how different the Catholic Church is, say, in Algeria, from South Africa to Ireland to Japan to the United States to Colombia to the Dominican Republic. Church looks very different in those cultural contexts, and yet in its essence it is absolutely the same. So we adapt to the culture we find ourselves in without ever betraying or surrendering the essence of the faith. That's the beautiful flexibility of the church, that there's room within Mother Church for every culture, every people, every tribe, every nation. And so we acknowledge the failures of church leaders and members of the church in regards to their lack of respect and even violence and injustice towards native peoples and certainly African Americans as well. And yet part of that is the proclamation of the gospel that occurred, and that is an objectively good thing. So in this feast of Junípero, Serra, we thank the Lord for those missionaries who came, settled here, and evangelized this new land, planting the gospel in the soil of the Americas.